Next, to some bleak statistics from the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF. Since monitoring began in 2005, over 120,000 children have been killed or maimed in conflicts across the world, while over 100,000 have been recruited as de facto child soldiers. UNICEF say these figures are based on verified cases, but the actual toll is likely far higher. To discuss the findings, who should be held accountable and how to better protect children in war zones, I'm very pleased to be joined now on the line by Catherine Russell. She's the Executive Director of UNICEF. Thanks very much indeed for finding the time to talk to us this evening.
Of course. Thanks, Nadia.
These figures that I just mentioned are stark, aren't they? I think it can be hard to sort of wrap your head around the data. What struck you most when you saw this report?
You know, it is shocking. I agree with you. The numbers are devastating to think about. And I think at the end of the day, what I always come back to is every single one of those is a child, right, who's been impacted one way or another, killed or maimed or abducted or suffered sexual violence. I mean, it's devastating to think about the scale of it, but also the individual impact on every single child who's suffered that way.
And UNICEF is hosting a conference this week in Oslo looking at how children can be protected in war zones. What's your message going to be to leaders who are attending, particularly those who represent countries currently in the grips of conflict?
Yeah. My message is this, war is a terrible thing, right? But war is the business of adults, and adults at a minimum should protect children in the course of conflict. It's inexcusable in my mind to let children suffer this way, or in fact, even to target children. I think all of us need to do better. The international community needs to hold people to account and say, if you want to fight, I would prefer that not happen because all war is bad for children. But if you want to engage in this, at a minimum, make sure that children are protected in the course of this. And that's unfortunately not happening right now.
Right. And you talked about holding people to account. I just wonder, practically speaking, what does that look like in a war zone?
Yeah, it's very challenging. I think the first thing is that governments and even non-state actors have to take responsibility for the people who are conducting war on their behalf. That's point number one, right? They are responsible for those people. They need to make sure that they're trained appropriately, that they understand that sexual violence is never acceptable against children, against women, boys, whatever. It's always bad. And that those governments and those non-state actors are number one responsible. Number two, I do think it is important to say as an international community, we do not accept impunity here. We think that these people are responsible for what they do. It's not inevitable that this happens in war. It happens because people think they can get away with it and they don't know better. And I think we really need to try to hold them to account.
And one of the issues that struck me when I was looking through the findings of your report is actually in relation to cash flow. It's an issue for UNICEF, isn't it? It's estimated that globally the child protection sector will need over $1 billion next year. But already there's a shortfall, isn't there, of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I wonder this week when NGOs are gathering, when donors are gathering, when representatives from different countries are gathering, whether that is something that you'll be talking about. And I suppose put rather crudely, will you be asking some of these nations to try and cough up a bit more money for this?
Absolutely. And I think we can help these children. That is, I think, one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind, right? We can help them sort of recover from what's happened to them. And I've met these children, a 4-year-old who suffered sexual violence. I mean, it was devastating to meet it. A young woman who was forced into the army. But we can help these children recover. But as you point out, what we need to do that is funding. I have to really say a big thank you to the Norwegian government. They're co-hosting this event with us. Others need to come to the table as well, right? They need to say that this is an unacceptable thing in the world, that children are facing these problems, and we need to do our best to help them recover if we can't prevent it in the first place. And every government has a responsibility to do that. Every person should think about the children who are suffering in such unimaginable ways we would never accept for our own children. Why is it okay if this happens in other places? It's not, and we need to do better to stop it and then to help these children recover.
And just a question on one specific conflict, if I may. Obviously, here at France 24 and at many other channels, Ukraine has been topping the news agenda for over a year now. I know you took on your job at UNICEF just a few weeks before that war broke out in February last year. I wonder how much the war has reshaped the work that you do at UNICEF.
Ukraine is interesting. I think it brings home to people in Europe and even in the United States, how dreadful war can be. And it hasn't really been at our doorstep in a long time. It certainly is the case that children in Ukraine are suffering. So many millions of them have been displaced from their homes, either to other countries or other places in Ukraine. We're seeing every day what that impact of conflict and war is on children. And I think it's an important reminder that, any child anywhere can suffer. And if any child suffers, everyone should care about that.
Catherine Russell, the Executive Director of UNICEF. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nadia.